Lepanto is often remembered as a simple story of Christian victory over Ottoman power, but that explanation is too shallow. The Ottoman Empire did not lose at Lepanto because it arrived weak. It arrived with more ships, recent momentum, and every reason to believe the sea still belonged to it. The real disaster came from something colder: a failure to use strength correctly. So why did the larger fleet become less effective? Why did superior numbers narrow instead of expand Ottoman options? And why did one battle, fought in only a few hours, become a case study in how command decisions can turn raw power into self-destruction? Because Lepanto was not just a naval collision. It was a structural failure at sea, a battle where the Ottomans entered with material advantage, but gradually reshaped the fight into a form that favored their enemy instead. By 1571, Ottoman influence in the Mediterranean had reached an alarming scale. The conquest of Cyprus reinforced the image of an empire still expanding, still confident, and still capable of dictating terms across major sea lanes. Ottoman corsair activity added further pressure, threatening islands, trade routes, and the fragile commercial lifelines of Venice. That pressure was not only military, it was economic and psychological as well. For the Christian powers, the problem was becoming impossible to ignore. Venice could not absorb such pressure indefinitely, and the wider political world of Catholic Europe understood that isolated resistance would be easier for the Ottomans to break piece by piece. Out of that fear came the Holy League, not a naturally harmonious alliance, but a coalition assembled under pressure by Spain, Venice, the Papal States, and other partners. Its purpose was direct and defensive: gather enough naval power to stop Ottoman momentum in one major confrontation. That coalition required extraordinary effort. Money, ships, manpower, and political compromise all had to be forced into alignment. The result was a fleet of more than 200 warships, one of the largest Christian naval concentrations seen in generations. By the time both sides moved toward Lepanto on October 7th, the battle had already become more than a tactical contest. It was a test of whether Ottoman naval expansion could still be checked by a desperate but coordinated response. And yet, before the main lines even fully engaged, the Ottoman command had already made the decision that would shape the logic of the battle. On paper, the Ottoman position looked favorable. Ali Pasha commanded around 278 warships, clearly more than the Holy League's 212 do it. In open water terms, that numerical edge should have created tactical possibilities: broader frontage, stronger pressure on the wings, more room to envelop, and greater flexibility in how force could be distributed. But that was not how the Ottomans chose to fight. Instead of using scale to stretch the battle, Ali Pasha concentrated a large number of ships into a crowded central mass site. It may have appeared powerful, even intimidating, but it reduced the practical value of his own superiority. A larger fleet gains much of its advantage from extension, spacing, and the ability to create pressure across a wider field. By compressing that strength, Ottoman command made the center denser, but the overall fleet less efficient. The Holy League, by contrast, deployed with greater coherence. Don Juan organized his fleet into a disciplined line with a firm center and wings expected to hold formation. Most importantly, he pushed 6 Venetian galleasses out in front. These heavily armed vessels were not built for speed, but for disruption. They were designed to break momentum, absorb approach pressure, and tear holes into an advancing enemy before the main clash fully developed. That contrast matters. One side used formation to preserve control and shape the engagement. The other side used formation in a way that reduced the practical expression of its own numerical edge. So before the battle had become chaotic, the structural imbalance was already visible. The Ottomans still had more ships, but the Holy League had prepared the battlefield more intelligently. When the battle opened, strong winds drove the Ottoman fleet forward aggressively. But the first major shock came from the Venetian galleasses. Their cannon fire struck the advancing Ottomans before the main body could fully close, damaging ships, disrupting alignment, and weakening the cohesion of the Ottoman approach. This was an important early distortion of the battle. The larger fleet was now entering combat already less orderly than intended. On the Ottoman right, Mehmed Sirocco attempted a flanking movement along the coastline, using shallower water to work around the Christian line. The idea carried tactical logic, but the terrain imposed its own limits. His force became overstretched and vulnerable. The Holy League responded by committing reserves, compressing Sirocco's room to maneuver and trapping his ships between shore and enemy pressure. The result was destruction rather than breakthrough. Sirocco's wing was effectively annihilated. In the center, the fighting became even more consequential. Ali Pasha drove the Ottoman flagship Sultana into direct collision with Don Juan's La Real, turning the central sector into a brutal close-quarters struggle. But as more Ottoman ships rushed inward to support the flagship action, the problem of broken cohesion worsened. Instead of reinforcing a disciplined central line, ships fed themselves into combat in fragments. That made them easier to isolate and destroy. The Holy League, especially through the performance of Spanish infantry in boarding combat, maintained stronger close-range fighting power where the battle had become most violent. This is the key analytical point of Lepanto. Ottoman strength did not disappear all at once. It fragmented. The fleet still had numbers, but numbers without discipline and usable spatial order became progressively less decisive. By the time Ali Pasha was killed and Sultana was captured, the center was no longer a functioning command corps. It had disintegrated. The irony of Lepanto is that the Ottoman side was not uniformly incompetent. On the left wing, Uluç Ali displayed exactly the kind of adaptive naval leadership the empire needed. He led a powerful detachment, attacked effectively, and succeeded in opening a serious gap in the Holy League line. For a short time, this was the one Ottoman sector that seemed capable of transforming local success into operational reversal. If that opening had connected with a stable center and an intact right, the battle might have become far more dangerous for the Holy League. Uluç Ali had the skill and aggression to exploit disorder. But that is precisely where the larger Ottoman failure becomes tragic. His success developed inside a wider structure that was already collapsing. While he was forcing opportunity on one flank, the center had already been broken, and the right had already been destroyed. When Uluç Ali turned back toward the center, what he encountered was not a battlefield still available to save, but one already lost. Sultana had been captured. Ali Pasha was dead. The psychological center of Ottoman resistance had vanished. At that point, even a capable commander could not reconstruct a fleet-wide recovery from a single surviving wing. As more Holy League ships shifted toward him, Uluç Ali recognized that the only remaining rational action was withdrawal. He escaped with part of his force, but only as a survivor of a defeat already sealed elsewhere. His retreat highlights the underlying reality of Lepanto. Isolated brilliance cannot compensate for systemic failure once command cohesion has collapsed. Lepanto lasted roughly 4 hours. In that short time, the Mediterranean became the site of one of the most devastating naval defeats of the 16th century. The Holy League suffered heavily, but Ottoman losses were catastrophic by comparison. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers and sailors were killed, and much of the fleet was sunk, captured, or destroyed. Only a reduced remnant survived under Uluç Ali Dahi. What makes the aftermath historically significant is not simply the body count. It is the lesson of how the defeat occurred. The Ottomans came to Lepanto with strong momentum, superior numbers, and a reputation for naval dominance. Yet those advantages were mishandled. Instead of maximizing width and flexibility, command crowded the center. Instead of preserving formation, ships fed themselves into battle, in pieces. Instead of turning scale into control, the fleet gradually turned scale into congestion and vulnerability. That is why Lepanto matters beyond symbolism. It was not merely that the Ottomans were beaten. It was that they helped engineer the terms of their own defeat. Their material superiority remained real, but its battlefield expression was distorted by poor decisions. In that sense, Lepanto stands as a warning that numbers alone do not determine outcomes. Command structure, deployment logic, and the disciplined use of space remain decisive. The Holy League itself would not remain permanently unified, and the wider war did not end Ottoman power overnight. But one illusion did die at Lepanto: the belief that Ottoman naval might was beyond serious destruction. After this battle, the empire was still dangerous, but no longer untouchable. And that is how Lepanto became more than a naval victory. It became a case study in how overwhelming strength can be reduced, misdirected, and finally broken by bad battlefield logic. What do you think mattered most in the Ottoman defeat? Ali Pasha's compressed formation, the collapse of discipline in the center, or the failure to turn numerical superiority into real control? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy this kind of colder, more analytical battle breakdown, make sure to like and subscribe for more.